Hey everybody, this is Matt. You're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. We're coming to you here once again from Spur, Texas, the international headquarters for Broke Rednecks. Anyway, what I want to talk to you guys about today is flooding. Y'all have probably seen on the news the horrendous flooding which has hit Houston yet again. In fact, it's the fact that flooding has hit Houston that has precipitated me wearing my Altuve Astros jersey. Now, the reason for this is when Hurricane Harvey hit and flooded literally everything in Houston, my boys won the World Series that year. So, I am hopeful that we may be in for a repeat, because Houston will always trade a little bit of flooding for a World Series ring. Anyway, the reason I want to talk about flooding today is because we're starting to see mass flooding events like this in areas that in the past wouldn't have had it. Especially as these tropical storms, like the one that hit Houston, are basically generating themselves very quickly, hitting a spot and kind of staying there, moving slow over land. And there are parts of Houston that, according to estimates from this morning, got 40 inches of rain. With Harvey, there was one spot in the area that got 62 inches. Where we lived at the time, we got a little over 50. Now, I wanted to also talk about flooding because this is something the kids and I have a lot of experience with. In addition to living through Harvey, we've also lived through 3 fairly serious just river floods where rain up in North Texas busted the rivers. Now, as I mentioned, we're getting a lot of flooding in areas we haven't previously had in the past. So, part of the reason for that is weather changes. I'm sure there's some climate change folks out here who want to talk about that. But part of it is actual just the way we're building things. As cities expand, we're getting a lot more in the way of concrete, subdivisions, highways, that sort of things, strip malls, being built in places that were once prairie. Dirt and grass will soak up a certain portion of the water, but if you've got a highway or a city or a strip mall, that water's got to wash somewhere. So a huge percentage of rainfall is not being soaked into ground anymore. As a result, it's feeding into rivers. It's also flooding areas because people are living in low-lying areas more. Houston's a fine example. They built Houston literally on top of what once was a swamp. I mean, one of the streams that runs through it's Buffalo Bayou because, it's a bayou. Anyway, so point is there's a lot more flooding. And what normally happens in Texas, as it applies to Houston, is you will get some flooding, you'll get some heavy rains in Houston, the storms that come off the coast move north and head up towards Dallas-Fort Worth. You're getting, once it rains up there, after the flooding that originally hit Houston leaves, then the rivers tend to blow. We saw that after Harvey and a few other events. Also, we're starting to see a lot of these flood events not being forecasted. And it's because what in the past, what according to a lot of the charts that meteorologists use, would not have been big flooding is all of a sudden now massive because, you go to Oklahoma, it's like the apocalypse when it rains 3 inches. But, you get somewhere like Dallas-Fort Worth where it rains quite a bit. It may not cause any flooding there, but that water washes downhill and blows the rivers. Of the 3 major floods from the rivers we lived through living in East Texas, 2 of them were non-forecasted. I remember the Tax Day flood, as we name our floods down there. The Tax Day flood, when that happened, the night before we were expecting 2-3 inches of rain. We got like 16. And it flooded everything. The storm went up north and it blew the rivers a week later. And Haley's is filming this for me. She's probably going to post in some pictures of this. So as I'm talking about some of this, you'll see what I'm talking about. In fact, Haley, this would be a good time for you to post in a picture of me walking through a river that was once a road looking like an idiot with bolt cutters and a fishing shirt. It's a good day. Anyway, because we have some experience with floods that a lot of people don't, especially as we're seeing floods hit the Midwest and other places like that, I wanted to share with you some of our experiences. Now, when it comes to flooding, the most important thing you can always have is information. We think of rain events, we assume that hurricanes, we're going to see them coming 5 days out. That's usually the case, but there's become a modern precedent, especially in the case of, I believe it was Imelda that just hit Houston. And that thing formed nearly overnight. There was no chance to evacuate, pull out of low-lying areas. It hit and it rained and it never stopped. And watching your local news is a real good way, just to sound stupid, but a lot of people don't anymore. It's a good way to just watch and check the weather. What we've also found helps when a flood is hitting is the National Weather Service. If you live near rivers, the National Weather Service has different things. They have sensors on a lot of the different rivers which will tell what the water level is and all that, which you can check. It also has a projection of what's going to happen to the water level. Will it or won't it break flood level, at what height, sort of thing. So that can be pretty handy. In the Houston area, specifically Austin County where we lived, there's a Facebook page called Austin County News. And it's, your usual political drama and everything else. But the upside to it is there are so many people in Austin and the surrounding counties that are parts of that Facebook page that when an event like that happens, there's real-time information. I was running security for a Toyota distribution center, and I was in charge of feeding information about, what was going on with floods, road closures, things like that, to my superiors. And I found Facebook to actually be more efficient in getting real-time information than even local law enforcement agencies have. It was astounding. But if your area has a local Facebook page like that that's just good at sharing up-to-date news, get on it and check it often. You had people posting pictures. Hey, even though they may say the road's open, here's a picture of it under 3 feet of water. So make sure you have the ability to get some good information. You also want to have an understanding that sometimes when a flood's going to happen, you are just going to have to get the hell out of there. We don't think of certain things as being in low-lying areas, but a lot of times they are. And especially if you're somewhere like Texas or the Plains states where 2 or 3 feet or 10 feet in elevation, we don't notice it driving around, but that little drop-off holds a lot of water. You guys know the areas I'm talking about, the road here or there that just for whatever reason, every time it rains a half inch, that thing's under 3 feet of water. Imagine if you get 15 inches. You need to understand these things are going to rise quickly and you may have to leave your area. And the first thing you guys want to have every time is a good solid go bag, bug out bag, whatever term you want to put on it. And I'll tell you a few things I'd keep in mind. Now, bear in mind, if we're bugging out from a flood, we don't have to go to another state or something like that. A lot of times you just need to get away from a specific area. But in that bag, you're going to want to have some things. Bottled water is a big one. You'd be surprised when you're trying, especially if you have to walk through water to get away from somewhere, how much that's going to wear you out and dehydrate you, but you can't drink it. You're also, and on the bottled water thing, have 4 or 5 bottles for every person that's with you, even if you're just bugging out a few hours. You're also going to want a good pair of rubber boots. A lot of people never think about this. Rubber boots, yes, like this pair here. It's Taylor's. They're probably Tractor Supply, I think, probably less than 20 bucks. Now, those things are handy for 2 reasons. One, yes, they keep your feet from getting wet if you're walking through a few inches of water. But they're also heavy rubber. They're going to have better protection on the soles than a lot of other shoes. So if you're walking through something, you can keep your nicer shoes dry and just carry them. But if you step on nails, because floods are washing debris from everywhere. If you step on nails or something, a pair of these things are going to be pretty handy. They're not going to puncture as easy. You're going to want extra socks. I cannot articulate to you how much when it comes to a flood you will want more socks. Have some sealed snacks, vacuum sealed stuff. It's in a package that water's not going to get to. You need a good light source. I like LED flashlights. You can usually get a good one at Tractor Supply for about 20 bucks. But 25, you can spend more if you want. There's 2 reasons for that. One is the obvious. If it's dark, and a lot of times these floods happen at night, you're going to want to be able to see where you're going. But the other thing is if you're driving away from a flooded area and you get stranded, and this happens quite a bit. I had a friend who got stranded. She saw a road was closed, turned around. By the time she got back the direction she was coming from, 10, 15 minutes later, trying to get back to a highway, the water had already broken a creek there. The fire department ended up rescuing her off the top of her vehicle. And that happened in a matter of minutes. Anyway, the upside to having a flashlight is if you're there after dark, you can signal people. Get a good solid flashlight so people know you're there. That'll be immensely handy, especially if the Cajun Navy's coming in. You want them to see you. I would also advise people get a topographical map. So many of the maps that we look at, Google Maps, whatever, don't do a real good job telling us low-lying areas. You need to be able to look at something and say, my subdivision, say at, 500 feet above elevation, but this area here is 475. Well, the water is going to flow downhill. You need to know to be able to avoid those areas. Have some cash on you, because, and keep, even if it's 20, 30 bucks, whatever you can afford, keep it in your kind of go bag, because you're going to find with stuff like this, that in events like this, that especially when they happen to big cities like Houston, they're taking out the main servers for a whole lot of things, and you're going to find a lot of convenience stores, the credit cards machines no longer work. You can be Bill Gates, but you're broke if you're stuck with plastic in a situation like that. Have some extra clothes, couple changes of clothes with you, because again, you're going to get wet. Also, have an orange vest. Yellow, orange, I don't care what color it is, but something preferably reflective. This is one that we use. They don't have to be expensive, but something that people, bear in mind, it's going to be raining, it's wet, people are driving by, they're trying to get out too. If you have to walk, you want them to see you. You also want a good pair of gloves. These are welding gloves. You don't have to spend that much. For a couple dollars, you can get a good pair of work gloves. But if you're trying to drive out, storms like this usually take down tree branches, things like that. You may have to move them, and don't cut your hand. First aid kit. You want to have a good one of those. If you end up having to walk, and you may, I've known a lot of people that have, you want a good first aid kit. You're going to get nicks and scratches and all that stuff. You also want something like alcohol or hydrogen peroxide to sterilize cuts, because I cannot articulate to you how much nasty stuff is in this water. You probably want to have a wool blanket or one of those reflective blankets you can get at Walmart. Something that will keep you warm even if it's wet. I say that because moisture lowers body temperature. When Harvey hit, it was September, kind of the end of summer. So it wasn't cold. I mean, we're in Texas, we don't ever get real cold. But in theory, it would have been warm, but you had the cloud cover, you had the storm coming through at lower temperatures. When people were soaking wet, I mean, it's 85 degrees outside, and they're pulling people out of the water that are having hypothermia. So have something that can keep you warm. A little bit of rope or tie-down straps always handy, just in case. Now, in addition, if you're going to bug out, it's probably going to be in a vehicle. You're probably not going to go hiking through lots of water. First thing with a vehicle is information. If you cannot see the road, don't drive through it. I screwed up a Nissan pickup I had one time. I was driving through what looked to be about 6-8 inches of water going to work because I had to get over there and run some stuff. And I'm cruising along, and all of a sudden my front tires go thump. Thank God it was a four-wheel drive. What I couldn't tell is the water had washed out that chunk of road that I was going over. There was culverts under it. The water had come through out of a field so fast it washed the culverts out, took the road with it. Had that pickup been rear-wheel drive instead of front-wheel drive, I'd have driven right into it. And that water was moving deceptively fast. When I stepped out of my truck, I'm in water that's less than a foot deep, but I could feel the pressure against my feet. It was legitimately hard to walk back uphill. So, one, with your vehicle, be very careful where you drive. Very careful. If the road's blocked, don't be smarter than the cops and try to go around it. One, it's against the law, and two, it's incredibly dangerous. Most of the people who die in these floods die because they're ignoring the cones and the warnings like that. But in your vehicle, make sure you've got jumper cables. Very important. Make sure you've got your jack and your tire in it. I say that because some people I know tend to take their spare tire and jack out of the back of their pickup and leave them somewhere, which really sucks when you get a flat. So there's enough debris. You want to make sure your spare's aired up and all that. Keep up with it. Make sure you have a phone charger in your car. Again, sometimes when storms like this hit, it takes out cell service, but usually in my experience, storms and floods like this don't. You want to have a good cell charger so you can keep your phone working. That's going to be vital for information. It's going to be vital for keeping in communication with people, and it's going to be vital for being able to call for help if you get into a pickle you can't get out of. Also, I tell everybody, pillow, blanket, sleeping bag. If you have to bug out somewhere, a lot of times you're going to find the hotels are packed. I personally don't like sleeping in shelters. So if you're going to have to bug out, sometimes the smart thing to do is sleep in your car. Well, it's a whole lot more fun sleeping in your car with a pillow. Bring a blanket with you. I'll also throw out there that it's better to sleep in your car than it is to stay in your house when it's flooded. Anyway, this isn't a whole comprehensive list, but it's a few things that you might want to have when something like this comes. Now, some of the little things that we have learned about events like this. One, that water gets toxic very quickly. Don't think if you're going to be one of these survivalist guys, you're going to go get the little straw thingy with a filter in it and be okay. You will not. These floods are taking out power stations, they're taking out water pumps, they're bringing up sewage. Bear in mind, this water is nasty. If you can avoid it, stay out of it. Also, don't think that you can tell whether or not the water's moving. I have been around a lot of water in my life, and when I got my Nissan screwed up, I had to learn the hard way that I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. You won't either. Don't risk it. make sure that you have a pre-prepared plan where to go. If a flood's going to happen, you know roughly where the high ground is, see if you can get there. Don't think that you can count on government services. In the case of the Harvey floods that happened, in several towns, including some of them near us, I'm hoping Haley can find some pictures of this, the actual Red Cross first aid shelters were underwater. The National Guard was using big trucks. We had civilians, Cajun Navy are the guys from Louisiana. We had civilians in bass boats and big wheel trucks pulling people out of areas they didn't think were flood zones. And that's the other thing. Don't assume that if you don't live in a flood zone, you're immune. You're not. I would want to know ahead of time. You know what? If you got a little Sunday afternoon when I'm doing this, you got a little time this week, take a minute, look at a topographical scan of your area. Know where the creeks are. Know where rainwater is supposed to drain to. Know about the parks with retention ponds that are going to flood. They'll be the first ones to go. All the water's heading towards them. They're going to be coming out. It's a good idea to have just a plan ahead of time. Don't be like, well, if it floods, I'm going to head somewhere. Have a plan. Hey, I'm going to call see if I can stay at my brother's house because, or I'm going to go see a friend over here, you know, whatever. Have a plan ahead of time and have a route charted that keeps you on higher ground. A lot of people know their towns really well, but they don't know its elevation. And the neighborhood I'm sitting in may be 3 feet higher in elevation than the neighborhood that I want to drive through. That may not seem like a lot, but in a flood, 3 feet of water will ruin your car. So this is the kind of thing you need to look at. You always want to be going uphill, not downhill. As I said before, check your weather, keep up with it, take the time, watch it, get the weather alert on your phone. That is really handy. And keep up with social media, that sort of thing. Try to stay on top of it. If you're going to have a bug out bag, and I think everybody should, make sure you have one for every member of your family. There's no sense you having the best bug out bag in the history of ever and forgetting to bring toys and food for your kids, or you know, something for your wife, or however that goes. You want to make sure that you have something for everybody and that they all understand what you're doing. Anyway, the thing is with floods, you can't always predict them. You don't always know when they're going to happen. Even when you do, there's sometimes no way you can stop it. We've had unfortunately a lot of experience. We've been in areas where we were fortunate that my house was in higher ground, and kids and I have gone out on rescues. We've gone out trying to help recover bodies even. In fact, one of the pictures of me playing in the water, that's what we were out there for. We were looking for a dude that turns out died being washed away, but we knew he was out there somewhere. We went out with the sheriff's department at the time, tried to rescue him. Anyway, with these floods, be as prepared as you can because they're going to sneak up on you. It can absolutely ruin, it will ruin billions of dollars of property, as you're seeing with Houston. Some of that property is just now getting rebuilt from Harvey. So it can also take lives very quickly. Don't play around with it. Always err to the side of caution with flood. Water is a dangerous thing. But do your research, do it ahead of time. And you know what, I know some of you guys out there have thought of a few things that I haven't or have some helpful suggestions. I'm sharing with you the benefit of my experience. Share with this page yours as well. And throw us a comment and let us know what you think. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the floods. I hope everybody's praying for Houston and rooting for the Astros. So, anyway, hope to see you next time. You're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. Give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks.